Hello people! Have you ever seen the sky and questioned yourself if there is any classification of the stars? At first sight, it is pretty obvious that the brightness is the parameter we use, since it is the most noticeable feature we observe. But it is more complicated than that. Since I have used Space Engine, I noticed that stars are classified upon letters. Then I heard about the HR diagram, which relates these letters with several parameters. It wasn't until I entered classes of introductory astronomy I realized that there was more than just colors and stars evolution. So in today's video I will talk about the stellar classification, more precisely the spectral classification. We will see it coming next. Let's begin. Nowadays we have a broader comprehension about the stars, but this is consequence of 200 years of astronomical observations. As early as 1735, the philosopher Auguste Comte understood that, due to the fact that stars are far away, we will never know directly anything about their composition. But this has significantly changed with the discovery of spectra in 1816, when Joseph Fraunhofer decided to observe the light through a prism through a modified telescope. This work started the study of spectra, and it didn't take much time before more scientists started to investigate the stars' spectra and discover new patterns, namely composition. For instance, Rutherford classified stars into three groups, corresponding to what we know as B, F, and OB stars. Then, Secchi was the most prolific researcher because he analyzed over 4,000 stars, publishing one of the first efforts to classify them. It was not until 1901 that N. Jump Cannon proposed a new system, rearranging them into a system of stars according to their intensity and the appearance of many different absorption lines in the spectrum. She ended with the familiar sequence OBAFGKM by 1912. Over the following years, and with the creation of the Astronomical Union, several commissions were formed, accepting the OM scale, but adding the Yerkes parameters for luminosity, in order to make some sense with the information. This classification is what we have today, with minor changes. Now I want to talk about spectrum. So, what is a spectrum? In this case, the electromagnetic spectrum, especially for the near ultraviolet, the visible and the near infrared. Why is it important? Since light is the only source of information from space, the spectral distribution tells us about the physical processes responsible for the emission and absorption of radiation, as well as the physical properties of the environment. And what tell us spectra? Through spectroscopy, tell us the composition of the upper layers of stars, and through flux versus frequency plots, tell us the temperature and the color of the stars. For example, here you can appreciate an extremely blue star with a temperature of about 40,000 Kelvin. We can appreciate a much higher flux in the blue part of the spectrum. There is also this line for a Sun-like star with a temperature of 5,780 Kelvin. And finally a red dwarf with a redder spectrum and a temperature of 3,000 Kelvin. There is also another application. For example, if you know the absorption lines of certain elements, astronomers can determine the velocities of stars via the Doppler effect, which I will talk in future videos. Now let's delve into the Harvard classification. It was initially an alphabetical one, because at first astronomers believed that each spectral type had a different chemical composition. So do I. I think it was logical, but since there was significant overlap between the types, ended in this sequence, OBAFGKM, as we currently know. There are also subtypes within each stellar type. Stars are placed into subclasses from 0 to 9 based on its position within the scale. And there is also the Yerkes luminosity classes to differentiate the size of the stars according to the width of their spectral lines. So now let's move up into the HR diagram. In 1913, Egnar Hertzsprung and Harry Norris Russell presented the HR diagram, named after their creators. It was a logarithmic graphic with different axes that related the Harvard classification, the relative luminosity to the Sun, the absolute magnitude, and the VV color index. This chart describes the life evolution of a star. Most of the stars occupy the region in the diagram along the line called the main sequence. For example, here we can appreciate the life evolution of a Sun-like star, starting as a G-star and then becoming a red giant, and then collapsing into a white dwarf made up of oxygen and carbon. Here I have an interactive diagram. I found it at astronomy.edu. At the left side we can appreciate several parameters and variate them, like temperature and luminosity. There is also a star comparison chart to show a depiction of how a star would look next to our star, the Sun. Over the right side is the HR diagram, with different plot labels to illustrate some groups and data. Within this diagram are several groups, like the main sequence stars, the blue and red giants, the white dwarfs, and many others, but I will explain them into detail in future videos. Now let's go to my favorite part, the examples. In the first place we have the O-type stars. They are characterized by having a strong blue color in the visible domain. Their temperature is over 25,000 Kelvin. They have more than 60 solar masses and a radius that exceeds 15 times the Sun's. Their average luminosity is about 1.5 million times more than our Sun. They present singly ionized helium lines, either in emission or absorption, and the strong emission of UV spectra. Secondly, we have the B-type stars. They also present a blue color. They have a surface temperature between 11,000 and 25,000 Kelvin, with an average mass of 18 solar masses, 7 times the radius of the Sun, and their luminosity is 20,000 times that of our Sun. Their spectra is characterized by neutral absorption helium lines. Then there are the A-type stars. These are blue stars that possess temperatures on their surfaces amid 7,500 and 11,000 Kelvin. In terms of mass, they are 3 times more massive than the Sun. Their luminosity is 2.5 times higher than of our Sun. They are up to 80 times more luminous and present H lines in their spectra. with decreasing thickness for each subclass. Next are the F-type stars. They start to approach to a whiter light, since all their colors are almost the same, with a slight tilt to the blue domain. Their temperature varies from 6,000 to 7,500 Kelvin. They began to approach solar units. For example, their average mass is 1.7 solar masses. Their radii is 1.3 solar radius, but their luminosity is a bit high, taking the value of about 6 times of our Sun's. In terms of spectra, metallic lines become noticeable, like calcium-2 absorption lines. In fifth place are the G-type stars, or even the Sun-like stars. They have temperatures that are very close to our Sun's, ranging between 5,000 to 6,000 Kelvin. Their average mass, radius, and luminosity illustrate their resemblance, showing values of 1.1, 1.1, and 1.2 respectively. Absorption lines of neutral metallic lines and ions become perceptible. In penultimate place are the K-like stars. Their temperature, which is between 3,500 to 5,000 Kelvin, is low. Hence, their color is orange to red. Mass, radius, and luminosity of these stars are below to the Sun's. For example, mass is about 0.8 to the Sun, radius is 0.9 to the Sun, and their luminosity is about the half of our Sun. They present metallic lines, and some molecular bands start to appear. Finally, there are the M-type stars. They are characterized by their red color. They are the coolest stars, since their temperature is under 3,500 Kelvin. They have masses up to 0.3 solar masses and radii up to 0.4 solar radii. They are generally very faint stars, so faint that they are not visible to the naked eye. They present on their spectra titanium oxide bands, as well as other binary compounds. And well, this is how stars are classified. First we saw a little of the historical background, then the importance of the spectra, and finally the culmination of years of observation in the HR diagram. I hope this video has been informative. Don't forget that I have a channel in Spanish, and forgive me for some errors I may have committed in terms of pronunciation. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please support and don't forget to subscribe, because not everyone who watches these videos does. The credits are in the description. See ya!